Here we go.
Hey, Mr. Pond
Let's
Boss,
go
tell me
live.
what to do
Have a little fun.
to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Yeah, let's go live and have a little fun. Talk about ponds and lakes and fish. Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk here, the Pond Boss, coming at you live after a fast-paced 3-day road trip. Actually, 4-day road trip. Got to go hang out with Peyton Igo over near all around Shreveport, Louisiana. Got to help him learn a little bit about managing lakes and ponds, and we had a big time. So, hey, glad you're joining me. And let's see, I don't know how many people we got so far, but you guys know the drill. And if you don't, I'll tell you the drill. If you will, put hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section, click like, and share this video to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and whatever else swag that Leanne's got lined up at the office. Hey, Pond Boss, here we go. Let's do this. Hello, Jay Spires. Hello, Danny Mack. There's Deborah Corlew. You guys know the deal. Good to see you guys, too. Hello there. Good to see you. So I got to spend several days hanging out with Peyton Igo, who's a wildlife management fella over in around Shreveport, Louisiana, and we actually came across, I think, these live videos at some point, and attended my last Institute of Higher Pondology. And I know that he's a really strong student of these things about wildlife and fish. So he wanted to have some different perspectives as to some of the stuff that he's doing. So I went over there and hung out with him a little bit, and we had some really fun times. I'll tell you about some of that here in a minute. Hello, Jay Spires, doing the hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Christy Berg, good to see you. Let's see here. We got off to a pretty good start. Let's see. This thing always pops up and tells me that the FPS is too low. The keyframe rate's too low. And I don't know what to do about any of that. So here we go. Let's go. All right, let me see here. I'm going to try to keep up with your comments as we go. If it'll let me. Yep, there's Jason Foley. So anyway, got to go spend some time looking at lakes and evaluating data on several of those lakes. So I want to take you through that just a little bit. There was one lake that's about 80 acres, and it's got a real active pond management, fisheries management plan. The culling program is pretty good. They're working to improve the habitat and make sure that the water's happy. So everybody that's ever watched my shows knows that I start off talking about the water. Happy water. If the water's not happy, nothing else matters. And that's the way that we approached this few days together. I wanted Peyton to really wrap his brain around how important it is that we manage and watch water chemistry. And so out of the, I think, 10 ponds and lakes that he and I looked at together, 3 of them, the water quality was terrible. And the decision was made to have that water chemistry analyzed and look at it through the eyes of a lab. So to go have some samples sent off so we can really study the water chemistry. Some of the water's tannic, some of it's acidic, some of it is real soft, and you can see that the reflection of the fishery is a direct result of the productivity of the water, and that was really evident in this trip. This last few days. So let's see here. Deborah says, we have a running bet here. We have noticed a ring on your right hand and is wondering what it was for. Hubby has a guess, and I have mine. If he wins, I buy a 12-pack of beer. If he wins, buys me a bottle of Cody Road whiskey. If I can enlighten, let's see what this says. Says see more. Enlighten us. If you can enlighten us on what your ring is, we can solve this wager. He claims that his price is even cheaper than the Friday night date. That's great. Well, let's do this here. You know what? I'm going to make it easy for you. Let me scroll down here. There it is right there. Let's turn it like that. Can you tell what it is? That is my class of 1979 Fighting Texas Aggie ring. So tell me who wins. I think that's great. I love that. I want to know who won. Got to know. It's been a while since I've been able to catch the live, but here tonight. Well, you know what, Brian, don't worry, because it's been a while since we did a live. I think it's actually been 5 weeks. I want to do one a month. Hello, Leah Groons. Kenny Sanderson, good to see you, buddy. You know, Kenny's doing something really cool. Kenny is quietly developed into an expert in walleye production, and he's created a center at his property in western Kansas, northwestern Kansas, and he's growing some walleye, but even more importantly, he's growing some saugeye. So he's crossing saugers with walleye. And those have never been available, to my knowledge, for private ponds and lakes. So I think that's going to be a big hit in the Midwest. And if you guys want to learn more about that, message me. Send me an email to info@pondboss. Deborah Corlew wins. Winner. He thought it was a fishing tournament. I thought it was a class ring. Hey, buy her some whiskey, dude. Get her some really good. You know what? Do you need a suggestion? I really like TX Blend, but it's really, I like that a lot. I mean, I'm not much of a whiskey person yet, but I think I will be tonight when I get through with this. I've been on the road all day. Let's see, Alexander Cohen, awesome stuff as always, Bob, watching the YouTube videos for 110 Acre Lake. Roughly how many threadfin would you be stocking for supplemental food? Okay, Alexander Cohen, here's what I'm going to tell you about threadfin shad for 110 Acre Lake. I'm going to kind of put it in perspective. Back in, I think it was 1989, Lake Texoma got cold enough that it killed the threadfin shad in Lake Texoma. That is an 89,000 acre lake. Well, there was a little power plant lake over near Savoy, Texas, and the water never got cold, and it just was teeming with threadfin shad. Well, the Texas Parks and Wildlife guys went over there the following spring, in the spring of 1990, and they collected 20,000 threadfin shad, and it repopulated that entire 89,000 acre lake. So what I'm going to tell you is that it's going to be dependent on what's in there to eat those shad. You know, it's going to be dependent on what's there to feed the shad. If you've got a good plankton bloom and you're not overcrowded with bass in that 110 acre lake, you could probably restock it with 10,000 of them. You know, and one of the questions you're going to have to ask is how many somebody's willing to sell you. As a matter of fact, most of the time, the threadfin shad producers, they want to sell them in a load, whatever that means. Typically, it means $2,000, and a load may range, depending on the size of the fish, from 6,000 to 10,000 head. So 10,000 is probably enough, but it's going to depend on if they've got the food they need to eat and what's in there that's going to eat them. So there's the answer I'm going to throw at you for that one. Let's see here. Hey, Tim Stewart checking in from, I'm presuming he's in Florida. Hello, Tom Davis. Christy Berg likes those saugeye. Let's see here. Kevin Briggs from North Carolina. Good to see you, buddy. Okay. Yep. All right. So here we go. Okay. Dump 10,000 threadfin. That's what I would do. I mean, I think that's right on the money. So until we get a few questions, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did the last few days. The first lake we looked at that I got to study the data on is about 80 acres. And there's been a really active culling program, culling largemouth bass 14 inches and smaller selectively. So if they catch a 12-inch bass that looks fat and rotund and happy, they throw that one back. But if they catch one that's at standard or relative weight or average, out it comes. And another thing is they have tagged, I can't remember how many Peyton told me, but they have tagged several hundred bass. And the electrofishing survey that was done picked up one bass with a tag in it out of over 100 bass collected. And then I got to look at the data, and the bass are all along the standard weight curve. They look good. They weren't underweight, but they weren't necessarily overweight. There weren't very many big fish collected, but you could tell by looking at the data that there's got to be some pretty big fish in there. My gut feeling was that they had moved off into deeper water, which was deeper than the electrofishing boat could collect them. So But the key to that lake is there were at least 5 size classes of bluegills, ranging from 9 inches all the way down to young of the year, which are about half an inch or 3/4 of an inch long. And there's lots of red ear sunfish, lots of threadfin shad. Now, I want to tell you about threadfin shad. Threadfin shad's primary role in fishing lakes is to promote the growth of 12 to 14 inch bass to push them up into that 15, 16, 17 inch size class. You're not going to typically see a 6-pound bass chasing a school of threadfin shad, but you will see 12 to 14 inch bass out there flushing those shad. And actually, standing out there looking at that lake, I could see several areas where it looked to me like bass were flushing threadfin shad and hitting them. Now, that's not to say that there won't be, some big bass under the small bass that are schooling and chasing those shad. The other thing was in that lake was gizzard shad, and there were some 2 size classes of gizzard shad. That the smallest size class was about 9 to 11 inches long. Then the others were probably 2 pounds, pound and a half. So they were really, really big. I'll tell you this, every trophy largemouth bass lake that I have ever managed effectively, we used gizzard shad as well as threadfin shad. I think gizzard shad are a key component. Now, that's debatable because, here's my opinion, if we don't have at least 25% of the mass of bass 3 pounds or bigger, then the gizzard shad run a risk of overpopulating, getting too big, and then causing problems that we don't want to deal with. So, but I do think gizzard shad are part of the success of this lake. Then the next lake we looked at, the data showed that the majority of the fish were 10 to 14 inches long with very few small fish. The data showed that the catch rates were much higher, which tells it that that lake is bass crowded. It didn't have threadfin shad, didn't have gizzard shad, but it had bluegills. Another lake that we got to look at the data on, this landowner was really disappointed. I think that lake was 5 or 6 acres, and just the electrofishing boat had captured something around 80 bass, and they were not one of them bigger than 12 inches. They said they did see one that was bigger than that, but the majority of those bass were not bigger than 12 inches, and they were 3 years old. Well, a little bit of that's water quality because there was not a plankton bloom in that lake. The habitat's inadequate. There was not nearly enough habitat year-round in that lake to be able to give safe haven to baby bluegills. Bluegills were the backbone of the food chain, backed up by red ear sunfish. So the water wasn't necessarily happy. Didn't have a good bloom, and it looked to me like, I think they're going to check the chemistry on that lake a little bit more in depth, but it looked to me like the water was acidic, the alkalinity was low just based on the color of it and what was growing in it. So I'm not sure that lake is as productive as it could be because of its water, and fish production is low partly due to inadequate amounts of habitat. All the habitat was peripheral, and it was temporary, like primrose, for example. And which means that the food chain was inadequate. If you don't have the food chain, you're just not going to grow the fish. Let's see here. Ooh, I'm kind of getting behind already. Good. I'd really like to have a bunch of questions. Okay, so let's see here. Will common carp interfere with bluegill beds? They can. They sure can. And I've seen lakes where the carp are overabundant, where I am real confident not only do they interfere with bluegill beds, they also have a tendency to stir the water up. Now what they'll do is they like to get up in shallow water about now and start reproducing. And you can see them bumping into cattails and so stuff like that. But will they interfere with bluegill spawning? Yes, they will. Will they affect recruitment of bluegills? Depends on the density of the carp. If there's a lot of carp, then I'm going to tell you, yeah, they will. Jay Spires joining from Floyd, Virginia. This week we've been around 70, almost 80 degrees by Friday, low into the mid to low 40s at night. Saturday we've got a cold front with tons of rain coming, dropping 30 degrees. Any worry for the fish with the temperature drop? there's a little bit of worry, but there's nothing we can do about it. Because what happens is fish being cold-blooded, when the temperature rises and the water temperature goes up, into the 60s, for example, and the fish start to spawn, and then the temperature plummets, and the cold front blows through, the barometer changes, that affects their behavior, and when the temperature drops, it can sure drive them off the beds. And if a fish gets driven off the beds too much, they may absorb their eggs. Now, bluegill, not so much, but I've seen that's common with crappie. That's pretty common with red ear sunfish from time to time. Bluegill, not so much. And the second worry about the water temperature dropping is and this typically happens more in the fall than it does in the spring. When the water temperature is warm, then it goes to cool, then back to warm, back to cool. That's a stressor that's enough to make the fish susceptible to a parasite or a disease. It's a parasite called ick. Now that's typically more toward catfish, but this is my 43rd year of doing this. I've probably seen ick 4 or 5 times in scaled fish. And where I see that is if bluegills are really crowded and being fed heavily and hanging around that feeder a lot. Okay, Drew Full Circle. I like that. Suggestion on cycles for aerating a small quarter-acre pond, 24/7. Uh-oh, we lost it here. Located in southern Wisconsin, spring cycle, summer cycle, fall cycle. No fish yet, mostly for pond plants and other wildlife. Okay, for pond plants and other pond life, do it 24/7. Just do it. Now, in southern Wisconsin, you're not going to get the heat that we see in the south and southeast. So, if you're going to have an aeration system in the southern states and southeastern part of the country, then what I tell folks is run it 24/7 until the water temperature hits 83 degrees. If your water temperature hits 83 degrees, then switch it to put it on timer and run it from 9 at night till 9 in the morning. Because you don't want the water temperature getting above 83 degrees is the magic number that I've learned over the years. Larry Hardesty, do you recommend grass carp? If so, how many for a 1-acre pond? Here's what I'm going to tell you about grass carp. First of all, you got to know what your plants are. If you don't know what species of plants you've got, then you really can't make a good recommendation as to what to do about it. So, grass carp will eat certain plants. They won't eat cattails. They can't eat water meal or duckweed. They can eat bushy pondweed. They can eat all the pondweeds. So figure out what plants you've got. And if you don't know how to do that, there's a great website, Aquaplant. Go to the Aquaplant website, Texas A&M. It's aquaplant.tamu.edu. That is a great website. First, identify the plants. Once you've identified the plants, then you can decide what to do about it. You've got 3 choices. You've got physical methods, you've got biological method, which is triploid grass carp, or you have herbicides. So after you find out what plant you've got, then you decide whether or not grass carp will eat it. Then the way you choose the number is what percentage of your pond does it cover. So if you got a 1-acre pond, and it's about 30% covered with the type of plant that grass carp can eat, then I'd put about 3 of them in it. Now, we looked at a lake yesterday that they put 12 grass carp per acre in a lake that's really shallow that was about 60% covered with plants apparently a few years ago. And now they're paying the price. That lake is baby butt smooth, very little habitat. The water has got some turbidity green to it because the grass carp keep the nutrients stirred up. That's a real good candidate for blue-green algae because they overdid the grass carp. So I'd be looking at it, and now they're trying to figure out how to get them out, and it's hard. You can't take an electrofishing boat over there and shock them out. They get a jolt of electricity and they're gone. You can feed them fish food, so now you're buying fish food and feeding them. And you can shoot them with archery equipment, bow fishing if you want to, and you'll get one and the rest skedaddle. You won't see them again for 5 or 6 days, so It's better to start light. So if you got a 1 acre pond, I'd start with maybe 3 per acre. And the reason I'm even picking 3 is because attrition can be high. So if one of them gets eaten by one of your bass, that leaves you 2. If I tell you to stock 1 and it gets eaten, you get nowhere. So that's why I'm picking 3. Now, if they don't eat it fast enough to suit you, then I'd be looking at one of the approved herbicides to get the mass of plants down so the grass carp can catch up. Now, here's the caveat with grass carp. You can't talk to them. You can't say, now, hey, come over here, eat these plants over here, don't eat these plants over there. You can't do that. And so that's kind of the catch-22 with grass carp. So I do like grass carp. I do think they're a good tool, and I'm a big fan, but you got to be smart. Drew Schmidt headed out to the pond now, experiencing a stress event. Lost several catfish. That ain't cool. Drew, if you're losing catfish, that's typically a water quality problem. The only thing you can do immediately is to figure out how to move the water. And that might be a sump pump. That might be, if you got electricity down there where you can go to Home Depot, buy a sump pump, buy some pipe, screw it into it, put the pump in a bucket, put the bucket on the bottom of the pond, start sucking water up, blow it at an angle out across the pond. That might be able to help you. We have the problem with stress events where you're losing catfish, that's typically because the catfish have been fed for years, they've been named, not harvested. So it's a good idea to try to take some catfish out from time to time. Let's see here. There's Chris Blood. Hello, Chris. Doug Cusick. Dustin Crawley. Let's see here. My good friend Chris Blood. Look at that great class ring. Deborah says, I can almost taste my Cody Road. I'm going to have to look up Cody Road whiskey. Hey, Chris, I'm trying to remember, you introduced me to a whiskey that we used to make old fashions with. And Clyde Mays, I got it. There it is. Deborah, look at Clyde Mays. And that came from Chris Blood with Texas Hunter. Let's see. I know I missed a question up here somewhere. We'll scroll back down and look at it. I guess not. Yep. No, here we go. Leah Groons from up around Beggs, Oklahoma. We have an 11-acre watershed west of Beggs. Throwing a cast net, I've caught gizzard shad in the spillway basin below the dam. Any tricks to catching them in the main body of the water? I have a throw cast net in the main body and no evidence of any. Let's see here. I got to spread this out. No evidence of any above yet. The next watershed is a mile away, so they could have come from down there and are now below my dam. That's probably how they got there. They probably swam upstream. Bought this property last June, just starting to get a feel for the bass population. So far, many in the 5-pound range, 12 inches, not many in the middle. Okay, I see. Okay. Hey, Kirk. Checking in Dripping Springs. I love Dripping Springs. That's such a neat little town. We had an RV up there for a while when we were having grandkids born in Buda. So that's kind of cool. So good to see you guys. So, hey, let's take a minute. I'm sunburned. Whew. My nose is about to burst into flames. How long have I been doing this and forgot to take sunscreen with me, and I spent time in the sun the last 3 days, and now my nose is about to blow up. Pond Boss Magazine, hey, $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date. Maybe as cheap as Deborah's whiskey coming up. I hope not. Hubby, you need to get her some good whiskey. $54. Go get it. You got this. Hey, this thing will be packed full of nuggets. All kinds of good information for you. Also, check out the YouTube channel, man. I've been uploading a whole bunch of stuff on the Pond Boss YouTube channel. The Pond Boss YouTube channel. You guys check it out. You don't think I'm red, Kirk? Uh-oh. Yeah, I'm pretty red. I feel red. Okay, Stephen Martin. 2 weeks ago I saw bubbles forming on the bank of my pond. I appreciate that setup. I'm going to give you an answer, but I got to laugh about it first. So So, champagne bubbles, super bubbles. So, I'm laughing at me, not you, because just the way my brain works. Saw bubbles forming on the bank of my pond. What that typically is amino acids coming from input, and it could be. I've seen bubbles form because fish were losing their slime. I've seen bubbles form from amino acids coming off of decaying plants. The bubbles, I've seen it come from input of fertilizer, phosphorus, that sort of thing. So bubbles are really not unusual. They're pretty common. Let's see. There's Frank James. Hello, Frank. Bob, after my largemouth bass devoured my bluegill last year during the drought in low water, I stocked 1,500 small copper-nosed bluegill and 125 pounds of tilapia in my 7-acre pond. Might that be too much? Or will the largemouth bass and hybrid stripers take care of the excess? That's not too much. That's not too much. Oh, Stephen, I see. Okay, I see where you're going. We'll circle back to that here in a minute. Let me talk about Frank's thing here. No, what'll happen is those. Frank, the thing is, you got to keep in mind when you built your lake, and you had some ledges and things around the edges, and you put pine trees down at an angle. Some of those went down into deeper water, so I'd be real surprised if your bluegill were decimated. But what you've done by adding 1,500 more, and if you're feeding them, I don't think that they're going to. No, you know what? And let's do this. Let's say 90% of those get eaten, and the other 10%, 150 of them grow up to be adults and start reproducing, and they'll start reproducing with some of the big bluegill that you've already got. So you've actually helped the lake. And those tilapia are going to help minimize that risk of your bluegills getting eaten. Okay, I'm sorry, hit the wrong button. Were these bubbles carbon dioxide from algae or oxygen? Rose Hill, Kansas. It's probably due to amino acids. I bet you. And that can be from decaying algae. So if you had an algae bloom, if your water temperature got up there pretty high, and then you had a good plankton bloom, algae bloom going on, and then the water temperature dropped, plankton died, some of it will float. Some of it, the cells will burst and they will sink. But when some of that stuff floats and then it hits the surface and it begins to burst, when the cells begin to decompose, that's when you'll see some gas. So it's probably not carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide in the form of gas bubbles, you're just not going to see bubbles of CO2 unless there's respiration going on at a really rapid pace in dense mats of aquatic plants. So I'm going to bet you that it's amino acids. That's just my WAG. Steve Thorburn. Yeah, Clyde Mays or Buffalo Trace. That's good. Yeah, I love Buffalo Trace. I'm going to have to buy some of that. Okay, let me see here. Hey, guys. Steve Thorburn. Hope it rains here soon. Cormorants showing up this week. Hope all of y'all are great. Yep. Well, I can't tell anybody what to do about cormorants, but I'd sure let them learn about their Second Amendment rights and help them commit suicide, move on down the road. We really don't want cormorants lingering very long. They will really wipe out your fish. Kirk, speaking of red, I saw a fishing YouTuber claim that bass had some film form over their eyes in spring which made them see red better. Supposedly that was one of the reasons that bass responded to red lures in the spring so well. Is there any truth to this? Why do they seem to like red in the early spring? Well, I have never heard that in my 40 plus years of messing with fish. I've never heard that bass form a film over their eyes in the spring which made them see red better. Actually, I'm gonna stand up and tell you that can't happen. That can't happen because it comes from the rods and cones in their eyes. Red is a symbol of blood. And when a bass sees red, it sees blood. And if there's blood, there's food. So that is an instinctive response to that color. Now, when they see red in the spring and they're defending a nest, they're going to go attack it. If they see red in the spring and they're hungry, they're going to go attack it. If they see red coming into a zone that they're trying to defend and protect, they're going to attack it. So that's kind of how that works. So it has nothing to do with the film over their eyes. Look at that. I love me some Chris Blood. A 1-year subscription is cheaper than a bottle of Clyde Mays. You know what? That's right. Clyde Mays is like $29.95. Okay, Steve Thorburn, I-70 corridor, Central Kansas. Okay. Deborah, there you go. See, hey, look at that Buffalo Trace and look at that Clyde Mays. The very first old fashions I ever had, Chris Blood made those, and oh my gosh, they were delicious. He muddled some orange, just a little bit of orange. He muddled some what the heck are those expensive cherries we bought? Luxardo cherries with just a little bit of bar syrup. Then he added the Clyde Mays, like 2 ounces maybe, with a big round ball of ice. If I remember, I think that was the recipe, and we liked it. We sat outside and we drank it around the fire pit. There you go. Deborah, you're on to something there. Just about the price of a Friday night date. But go ahead and subscribe to Palm Boss Magazine if you haven't done that. Thanks, Chris. So, hey, golly, time's flying. We've already been going 30 minutes. So, look at here. Here's another one. Micah during on a 1.5 acre pond in eastern Washington that is deemed a wetland by the county. I would like to remove some vegetation to improve bass spawning habitat, but the county is persistent that all native vegetation must remain. Can you advise on any rights wetland owners have when it comes to managing the vegetation? I can tell you what it is in Washington, zero. They will put you in jail there. In Washington and in Oregon. You do not mess with wetlands in those liberal damn states. Now, that's one side of my brain speaking, which means that our rights are infringed on way too much, and I don't like it. The other thing is, I'm real resistant to mess with wetland plants. Now, I don't think you should remove any wetland plants, but if you can see how you can enhance wetland plants using native vegetation, if that's the goal, if you want to make the wetland better by diversifying the plant community with native plants, I don't know why they would object to that. Now, if you think that you want to try to improve bass spawning, that to me that suggests that you want to remove some plants. Don't do that. That's just not a good plan, and they'll come down on you hard. There's a guy in Oregon. I can't remember his name. He came to one of the Palm Boss conferences 10 years ago or so. And he had been arrested twice because he had bought a piece of property that had a pond on it. And the county dictators had told him to take the dam out. And he said no, he wasn't going to do it because it was for wildlife and water for firefighting. But they got into a pretty big pissing match, and they ended up putting him in jail twice for trying for disobeying. He ended up selling his property and moving to another state. So, Micah, don't mess with the wetland plants. If you want the bass to spawn better, move. I say that with all respect and kindness and affection. So, let me see here. Let me think about what else we got. I need more questions from you guys. And I don't want to come across as callous about that, but when we start talking about wetlands, especially when we have a Democratic regime in Washington D.C., the Democrats are in charge, then they're real adamant about that. They probably don't even want you to try to improve the wetlands. So that's the way I see it. Old fashions are from up north, don't you know? Nope. All I know is I liked it. When Chris Blood made it, I liked it. And then I ended up making a few beyond that, and I still like it. It's pretty funny. I didn't put a drop of alcohol in my body until I was almost 50 years old. It seems like I've been a dadgum high school kid since then, and trying to make up for it and learning about all these different drinks and things, and it's just fun. All right, so some of these lakes that we looked at the last few days, the 80-acre lake was probably the best one because it had a wide variety of different sizes of largemouth bass. It had 5 or 6 size classes of bluegill, had threadfin shad, gizzard shad, red ear sunfish. So it had a good, diverse community, and the habitat was pretty good too. There was another one we looked at where it was an old rock pit. I guess it was gravel or iron ore taken out of it, but the water was so acidic that it was the same color as iced tea. And it was, I tell you exactly, I bet if we looked at that lake from the air, it would look like a pocket comb with a lot of teeth. It's so where they would mine it in strips and take the overburden and put the overburden right next to the where they were mining last time. So it's got like all these long fingers in it, and it's covered up with frog bit. Another name for that, snot bonnet. You know why? Because the bottom of those little leaves feel like snot. They're slimy, slick. And the fish community had intermingled with a local creek. So there were, the data showed that there was, I think there were gar, suckers, a handful of bass, but the productivity of that water was really, really low. So the key take-home points that I got from working with Peyton Igo this week was water quality. I think water quality is the biggest obstacle to overcome with what he's trying to do with his wildlife and fisheries management problem over there with his program. Let's see here. Look at there. There's Jerry Ohlert checking in from San Antonio. Jerry's an outstanding videographer. If you guys are looking for video work and you're around San Antonio, get in touch with Jerry. Just friend him here from Facebook. How can I assess the success of my largemouth bass spawn this year? Let's see here. I'm going to answer that by, let's define success. When fish reproduce, their number one job is to replace themselves. So with largemouth bass being the predators they are, the success of your spawn, you won't know it until next fall, and that's when you're seeing 9 and 10-inch bass that were hatched about right now. So while we were out motoring around in these lakes this last few days, we saw several. There was one lake where we probably saw 5 schools of bass that were just rising off the nest, and there was probably 6,000 to 10,000 bass in each one of those schools. You know, and you could see them flutter up in the moss and stuff. As we drove up closer, you could see them. You know, so the way you assess your success is based on what you see next fall. Because if we went back in 10 days and took an electrofishing boat and started trying to find those schools of bass in those lakes we looked at in the last few days, those schools would be gone. The best of the best would be about 3 inches long in 3 weeks, and the majority of them would be eaten by their bigger brothers and sisters. So the other thing is a successful largemouth bass spawn really means that you've been able to have enough fish to survive to replace any fish that are lost to harvest or attrition. That's one of the reasons we tell people, you know, when you set up a harvest plan, you're going to be harvesting fish, mostly bass, in the 10 to 14 inch size range. And then the common question is, well, how do we know when we've taken enough? Well, you probably don't. You probably haven't taken enough. Oh, my dog is going crazy. Hey, just open the door there. Just open the door, Ash. I hadn't seen. Come here. Come on, get up here. Come here, sweet love. Oh, yo, get up here. Come on. Come here. Come here, girlfriend. Get up here. Come on. Here. Right here. Come on. Get up here. Holy cow. Come here. Whoa. Oh, my God. Oh, my gosh. Woo. Woo. Oh, I hadn't seen her in 3 or 4 days. Goodness gracious, girlfriend. That's pretty funny, isn't it? Okay, so assessing the success of your bass spawn. You won't need to do that until the until the fall, and that way, if they fit into that, let me collect my thoughts. Okay, you want to replace fish that have been taken by harvest or by attrition. Don't you love dogs? Ray Scott told me one time. This is a funny story. I was at his place over in Alabama. I helped him take care of his lakes for about 15 years, and I was at his place one Saturday, and we were actually watching college football. And he's an Auburn fan, but we were watching Texas A&M play Alabama. That was the year Johnny Football was playing so well for the Aggies, and the Aggies beat Alabama. So we were whooping it up, drinking old fashions, by the way. That's pretty funny. And he made his with scotch, which I'd never heard of that. So anyway, he had 5 weenie dogs, 5 little dachshunds, and he loved those dogs. And one of them squatted and dropped a nugget right on his carpet. Well, Ray got up, walked over there, picked that nugget up with his bare hand, walked over, opened up the back door, threw it out on the lawn right by his lake. And I'm watching him thinking, I'd at least got a paper towel or something. And he walked over to me and he says, "Pond Boss, don't you think God had one of his best days when he made dogs?" I said, "Ray, I think he has." And y'all just got through seeing evidence. I mean, if you can't feel the love of that animal right there, I don't know what to say. So, assessing the success of your largemouth bass spawn, you'll know it in the fall. And if it was really successful, you'll have too many bass. And because I would rather bass not spawn every year, and I'd rather replace them with fish that I want than I know the genetics for. Girlfriend is about to chew my leg off. Okay, Jay Spires, we need to start what Bob said for your best quotes. Woo. Okay, let's see. Drew's got brandy, ginger beer, maple syrup, and I forgot about the bitters. That's right. Okay, brandy, ginger beer, maple syrup, and Angostura bitters. I forgot about the bitters. That's right. That's something Chris used as well, like 2 drops of bitters. Okay, Deborah Corley been raising from seed bog plants for northwestern Illinois, hoping to plant later this summer, wishing there were more places to purchase bog plants in bulk. I do too. There's some places, but not that many. Eric, 1 acre, 8 to 15 feet deep. If you had 1 acre, if you had 10 bass make it from now until then, you did really good. Steve Thorburn, what predators will handle young bullhead that come from upstream? Can you touch on that? Yeah, sure. Anything with a mouth bigger than the bullhead. So largemouth bass are great predators. And believe it or not, big bullheads are great predators. I have electrofished over the years bullheads. I remember one I shocked up one time that was probably 2 pounds, had a 7-inch gizzard shad in its stomach. I have found frogs, turtles, bluegills, and bass in big bullhead stomachs. So, we're pretty convinced that they're scavengers, which they probably are if they have to be. But they are also top-end predators. So largemouth bass will eat bullheads. The big channel cat will eat bullheads. The problem with bullheads is those young ones, they can reproduce so fast and with so many babies that can be the problem. But as long as you've got, and even bluegills can eat little bitty bullheads, but bluegills are limited by how big their mouths are. Crappie can eat them. So what I'm going to tell you is let's just do a little school on bullheads. Bullheads typically live anywhere from 3 to 6 years, depending on the part of the planet. Now, in northern tier states, they'll live longer because they have a finite amount of heartbeats. Just look at it like that. Use that for a comparison. The warmer the water, the faster their heartbeats. In northern tier states, they'll feed heavily in the summertime, then they'll go dormant in the winter, and they'll metabolize almost all their fat, and then commercial fishermen start catching them, and they end up on the menus in some of the nicer restaurants, up in New England and upstate New York. I mean, I've eaten some bullheads in restaurants and on the shores of Lake Ontario that you tasted that fish, you think, my gosh, that's the best fish ever. Where in the South, they're not considered tasty at all. They're considered kind of a nuisance. So predators, largemouth bass are probably your best choice for predators to eat young bullheads. Okay, Jay, thoughts on adding koi to our pond? Tiger bass, bluegill, shellcracker, stocked bluegill, shellcracker, Have been in about 1.5 years. Tiger bass going in, and first just going in July. Okay. So here's the way I see that. I've always been a sport fish guy, so I've always looked at koi as second-class citizens. I guess that's the way I'm going to look at it. So my wife absolutely loves color. I mean, just look at all this stuff behind me. I didn't do any of that. She decorated all this stuff up. Bookshelves. See all the color and stuff? I put books on bookshelves based on what they say. She puts them on bookshelves based on the color. So she was wanting, years ago, some colorful fish before we sold Lusk Lodge, 2. And in a weak moment on her birthday, I was at Inslee's Fish Farm, and they raised Japanese koi. So I said, hey, how much you guys want for some of those koi? And they had a couple of hundred, and they said, well, for you, we'll double the price. I said, that's pretty fair. Let's go. So I picked out, I can't remember how many, like 35 of them, and they were about 8 to 10 inches long. I think I paid $5 a piece for them or something ridiculous, and loaded them up, and brought them to the house. Went and got Debbie. I said, hey, honey, I got something for you. And I'd been real resistant to put koi into any of the sport fish ponds. Well, we had this pond we called the Old Pond because it was the only established pond that we had on the property at that time when we bought the property. We built 7 other ponds. And so we called this the Old Pond, and I had renovated it, done some things to it, and stocked it. We were using it to test fish foods for Purina Mills and stuff like that. So she climbed up in the truck, and she raised the lid up at that tank, and she saw all those beautiful fish and gave me a big old hug, and we put them in that pond, and I kind of shook my head thinking, what am I doing? But I'm going to tell you, those fish are still in that pond, and then I did that like in 2003 or 4, and they're still there 20 years later, and they weigh about 20 pounds a piece. And the people that bought the property, that's one of their favorite things. And it was one of Debbie's favorite things, because she could go outside, sit on the porch, look at the swimming pond right below us, and then turn her head drinking coffee, and she could see those koi when they were spawning or when the feeder went off. They'd come up and eat that fish food. A handful of them did migrate across the levee into the swimming pond because those 2 ponds were adjacent. So we had a handful of them in the swimming pond. So they never did disrupt the fishery, in my opinion. I didn't see where that many disrupted. Now, what my fear was that they would reproduce so prolifically that they'd become the dominant species. But I kept enough bluegills, red ear sunfish, hybrid striped bass, and largemouth bass, feed train largemouth bass, in that pond that if they dared reproduce, they'd get eaten. So, Jay, what I'm going to tell you is when you stock your tiger bass, let them get to be 10 to 14 inches long before you put any koi in there. You don't want the koi to gain an advantage and be able to reproduce enough to have any survival. Here's the problem with that. When koi reproduce, the babies are all kind of a carp color because they're, drum roll please, carp. So they're all kind of a bronze carp color. So what you want to do is and then they don't all change color. If you don't feed them a special feed, they won't change colors when they're little. So you get a handful of real pretty ones out of a fistful that aren't. And so I would wait until my bass were big enough that they could eat the young of the year. So when you get 10 to 12 inch bass, if you want to put some 8, 9, 10 inch koi in there, go ahead and do it. I don't have any issues with that at all. All right, let's see here. Let me see here. Holy cow. Yeah. My buddy I see where you're going. My buddy put 9 koi in my 3/4 acre pond when they were getting too big for his little koi pond. They're doing really well. A few over 2 pounds now. Perch and minnows established. 5 bass in it so far. Well, I've said what I think about that. Year 3 for his pond. Stephen Martin, Dustin Crawley, man's best friend. Yeah, girlfriend was happy to see me. Okay, Kirk, fished a little tournament on Lake Travis last week, which is about 35 feet low, and the shad spawn was on. Billions upon billions. Yeah, that's it. That's what they do. They run along the edges right at daylight, 30 minutes before daylight until just a little after dawn. During other times of the year, even colder months, during the pre-dawn hours of a full moon night, there were billions of minnows swimming to get away from the boat. That would be, I tell you what, that's probably going to be in that lake, Kirk. Look up ghost minnows. Look up silver sides. I bet you that's what those are. I bet those are silver sides. Those are pretty cool. And they're not necessarily spawning. They're there to seek heat if they can get it. Doug Brown, adding threadfin shad in the pond with Richmond Mills pond conditions, good or bad? Bad idea. Threadfin shad into a Richmond Mill type pond won't work. The water's too acidic. There's no plankton bloom, so those shad don't like acid water, and they don't like not being able to eat. They're filter feeders. Threadfin shad are filter feeders. Gizzard shad are bottom feeders. So when the threadfin shad begin to reproduce, their babies have got to have food immediately, and they can't get it out of water that looks like iced tea. pH level 6.7, water resembles a glass of medium. I just don't think that they're going to do that well, Doug. I think that they're probably going to fail. But you know what? I'll tell you what I do think. If you don't mind, I mean, you'd probably spend as much on a weekend trip somewhere that you'd forget for the same amount of money you could buy a few threadfin shad for. Try it and see. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, then you learn. Okay, Micah says, I asked that question because I believe dying vegetation, American pondweed, could be responsible for a fish kill that occurred last fall. I lost multiple 4 to 5 pound largemouth. That sure could be. The pond is 35% filled with thick pondweed. It's spring fed, 18 feet at the deepest. Also share your sentiments with the state of Washington. Yeah. If you had multiple 4 to 5 pound largemouth bass, then spawning is probably not an issue. Now, you know what? I'm going to circle back on that question. I'm kind of hearing something here with your asking me that question. I think the question is, what can I do to replace fish that are gone? Man, buy some. Find a hatchery and go buy 25 largemouth bass with better genetics that are suited to your part of the planet, and you'll spend $100 or less. And do that. Then you're not having to worry about bass reproducing in that pond in Washington and then overpopulating with a bunch of small bass. So if they're not reproducing, which they probably are, or you wouldn't have the 4 to 5 pound bass in there unless somebody stocked them. But if you don't think they're reproducing well, then go buy some bass and stock in it. It's a lot better, more effective with better results. Okay, let's see here. The pondweed is so thick it's choking out the prime. Yeah, okay, good. Let it choke them out. If you want to get rid of some of that pondweed in the pond, you have to check what your regulations are in that state as to what you can do about it. You might be able to pull out some of the pondweed because it's pond. It's in the pond. It's not the wetland. But I would also look at what I just said and see if you can buy some bass. Mark Dyer, how were the bullheads spawn? Blue. Just wash my tongue. I can't do anything with it. Bullheads spawn about this time of year in a nest, and they sit on the eggs for just a little while. They're not necessarily cavity spawners like channel catfish are. And the eggs hatch fast. So, and then the babies come off the nest really, really fast. What Bob said, second-class citizens. Well, I have to tell you, Coy are not second-class citizens, but I thought they were. But I really, really, over the years, enjoyed watching those dadgun fish. I mean, I could just stand there and watch them, watch how they behaved, watch how they glided through the water. Some of them, I think there were 2 of them that had gigantic fan tails. So in watching how those fish would move through the water compared to their cousins that didn't have the fan-shaped tail, it was pretty cool. Okay, let's see here. One Acre Pond, Jamie, I'm going to butcher your last name, but I'm going to give it the best I can. Vitort. I don't know. I hope I didn't. 1 acre pond in Wisconsin, problem with too much vegetation. Should I pursue fertilizing or pond dye? Neither one. If you've got too much vegetation and you fertilize the pond, then what's going to happen is the vegetation is going to go crazy. It's going to grow a lot more if you fertilize it, because the fertilization is designed to start a plankton bloom in the water column itself. And if you put fertilizer into water where there's already some plants growing, you're probably going to fertilize them. And the dye, all the dye does is the dye blocks some wavelengths of sunlight, typically UV rays, depending on which dye you use, which prevents sunlight from penetrating and allowing plants to grow. So if plants are already growing, then dye is going to be irrelevant. Okay, let's see here. Kirk is saying, what is a tiger bass? Another name for peacock bass? No. A tiger bass is a cross between genetically selected Florida strain bass and genetically selected northern strain bass. And it's a trademark name by American Sportfish Hatchery out of Montgomery, Alabama. So it's a largemouth bass that is selected genetically to have the best of both worlds of the parents. So it's kind of like a hybrid, but it's not. It's not a hybrid. It's an intergrade cross between two strains of that species. Okay, yep, Kirk, you're right. They'll pay big money for koi based on their markings, and you can pretty well bet when I paid $5, it wasn't for those kind of fish. Frank James is talking about F1 tiger bass. There you go. Joe Hobbs, 3+ acres pond. How is the best way to know what to remove to get bigger fish without electricity testing the whole pond? Catch some fish, weigh them and measure them, and compare them to standard weights for that fish. So if you're catching fish that are underweight, they lost weight. Those are fish that you want to cull. So that's a good way to do it. Weigh and measure some fish, keep records. And if any of you guys want the spreadsheet that I use to judge largemouth bass statistically, I'll send that to you. Just send me an email. Joe, send me an email at info@pondboss.com and say, hey, Bob, I was listening to you tonight, and I'd like to have that spreadsheet. Then if you'll weigh and measure some fish, plug the numbers into that spreadsheet, it's going to put a little diamond on this standard curve that's going to show you where your fish fit. And if they're underweight, it won't take long for you. If you catch 25 bass, you weigh and measure them, plot them into this graph, it's going to show you where they fall. And if they're underweight, that's the size class fish that you're going to start taking out. So, hey, you know what I didn't do? I didn't do a little commercial for the folks that sponsor me. Chris Blood, Texas Hunter Feeders, Texas Hunter Products. They've got Texas Angler Products. They've also got fish habitat devices that are pretty cool. You guys check them out. Go to TexasHunterProducts.com. Look at the Texas Angler Products. Look at the fish feeders. Look at the deer blinds. Look at the wildlife feeders. Those guys are, and not only are their products astounding, their customer service is astounding. And that's probably my favorite thing about that company. I love the products, but I love how they take care of their customers. Carina Mills. I'm going to go work on their lake at the end of May and just see how it's doing. Look at it every spring. Make sure things are clicking. Make sure their water's happy, which sometimes, living in the middle of a research farm with animals everywhere, though sometimes the water's not real happy. So they're learning how to deal with that. And they make outstanding fish foods. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of testing some of those fish foods and giving them my input. They actually take it. They like my input, which, okay, I help feed fish for a living. Easy Docks of Texas. Check that out. David Schneiderman, I don't see him tonight, but he probably didn't know I was going to go live tonight. And then huntbirddog.com. Check that out. That is my son Jonathan's company. And that young man is found a formula that if you like to hunt, you don't have time or don't have a lease or don't have resources, that is something to look at. So check that out. So let's see here. One more. Kirk says, if you do some electrofishing in Central Texas, let me know. I'll come and do some work for free. Seems like a really cool thing. Yeah, it really is fun. So, hey, guys, don't forget, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. Hey, Chris, good deal. Yeah. Fish feeder, fish habitat. There you go. Click on that link right there that Chris just did. Do it right now. Deborah, Give your honey a hug and tell him I'm glad you won and do something nice for you. So until next time, which will be in another month or so. Oh, and don't forget about the YouTube channel. I got a lot of stuff going on there. So it'll be another month. I'll post a date on this Facebook page at some point and let everybody know when we're going to go again. And so until then, adios.